All right. So my name is Nick Nepomuceno. I'm an enterprise customer success manager at Lyta. And today I'm joined by a creative operations powerhouse. Her name is Lauren Gearhart. She is the brand design project manager at Sheetz. And today you see why I call her a creative operations powerhouse, as she tells us a little bit about Sheetz' creative process. If you're not familiar with Sheetz, Sheetz is one of America's fastest growing family-owned and operated convenience store chains with more than 24,000 employees. They operate more than 670 locations throughout the mid and South Atlantic regions and serve over 1.5 million customers every day. They have award-winning menu of made-to-order sandwiches and salads. And I must add here that their steak and fries salad is my personal favorite because it has steak and fries and it's a salad. But their in-house creative team consists of 25 team members ranging from content creators to project managers and catering to over 200 stakeholders. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks so much, Nick. I'm so excited to see so many people join us today. I'm happy to be here and see what I can share about Sheetz and how we best manage our creative resources. I don't think that we're the only team, trying to figure out how we best utilize the resources we have. We have goals that are really similar to other teams, I'm sure. We need to deliver on our ever-growing project list. We need to do it on time by planning and allocating our resources. We need to keep our team members motivated to be creative and feel like they're providing value through their work. And we need to not run anybody into the ground while we're doing it. So if we do this well, we can really maximize our throughput and deliver quality solutions at the best cost.
I'm so excited for this webinar, and I know everybody is excited as well. Just a couple of things before we start. First, the webinar is being recorded. And the recording will be shared with you if you register today, so you'll get it. So if you miss anything or want to take a second look, you'll be able to do that. The second thing is that we will have some room for questions at the end of the webinar. So it is important that if you have a question, please use the Q&A section of Zoom to ask them. We'll get to as many questions as possible. And if we don't get to your question, we'll reach out afterwards. So it's important that you use the Q&A section. Now, if you have comments, if you have suggestions, or if you just want to hype us up a little bit, feel free to keep using the chat as you have been. But without further ado, Lauren, take us away.
Awesome. Let's dive in. So overview, how do we do this at Sheetz? We really try to mitigate requests first. And then we make sure that we can forecast our demands. We try to understand our capacity in order to meet those demands. We manage our resources based on our capacity. And lastly, we reflect and optimize based on what we've learned. So let's start with mitigation. So why would we even put work onto our team's plate if we don't have to? I think most simply said, why do it if you could just not do it? So we turned one of our volume driving request types self-service. We set up a brand center that allows our sponsorship partners to grab approved assets without even having to drop us a request. In case they can't find what they need, though, we do still include a link to self-register into Workflow, where they have access to just the appropriate request forms for this type of work.
And I love this idea. It's such a creative use of the brand center feature in the DEM. Some of you may remember that we talked about stakeholder experience in our last webinar. If you haven't seen that one, you can go check it out after this one. And this is a great example of something that enhances their experience because now they can see what has been created already, use one of the existing assets, and they don't have to make the request. Then they can, they have everything they need, so they can just run with it while also taking the extra work away from your creative team.
For sure, this just makes it easier both on them and for us.
Right. Yeah, so the thing there is that stakeholders don't know everything that the creative team has created, right? So giving them that easy access can be a quick win-win.
So for everything that we can't just not do, we make sure that we can track it and we can forecast against it. So this all starts with data collection. So we start by measuring what our team does today. And the easiest way to collect this data is through project templates. So first, we created standard tasks that make reporting easy to pull and accurate. We named similar tasks with similar work names. This consistency also helps to support alignment to standard SOPs, which makes it really easy for the team to understand what the expectations are that are set. Excuse me. The next one, we all swear by LOEs. Sorry. So sorry. So we swear by level of effort. There are lots of jokes going around and memes with our team about anxious PMs when designers can't answer level of effort questions. But I can still say that this is really the most impactful thing that we've implemented to better understand our resource utilization. We set average amounts of time per work item directly into project templates. The averages vary by the project tier, which is complexity, and marketing vehicle type, but they're really just a starting point for us. Upon project kickoff, the team reviews and adjusts any of the tasks they need in order to deliver on the agreed scope of work. So the level of effort may still be wrong, but we just keep dialing in the averages as safeguards that we can default back to when we're less sure. Also, since we separate our creative development work items from our proofs, we can actually capture the level of effort per proof version since they're different tasks now.
Level of effort, it's something that I see that a lot of creative teams are struggling to deploy because they tend to think that it needs to be perfect for everything. And the truth is, it really doesn't. It's not perfect math. It should be used more of as a baseline like you guys are. And then, if needed, the level of effort can be changed by the designer or the project manager, whoever is engaging with the team.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely don't always get it right the first time, but we just sort of dial it in as we go. And last but not least, really the heavy lifter for data collection for us is custom fields. So we set up our custom fields with preset returns in our project templates, and it helps us to define the types of projects and the priorities. So our primary custom fields in this regard are marketing vehicle and tier. Marketing vehicle is pretty straightforward. So those are going to be things like billboards, emails, POP signage, paid media vehicles, things like that. Tiers we do define in a pretty specific way that allows us to align complexity to requests. So with tier 1, these are really large campaigns. The number of marketing vehicles may change, but it's usually maybe around 8 to 15. These have standalone and potentially multiple concepts that we develop, and we do a full studio production. There could be even multiple shoots aligned with production for these large campaigns. Tier 2 is a slightly smaller campaign. There might be 3 to up to 8, maybe 10 marketing vehicles with integrated concept development and a smaller scale production. With these, we really hope that we're not shooting more than once. And these concepts are really sort of plug and play across multiple vehicles. And with tier 3, for us, this is non-campaign work. So these are standalone projects only. And there's no concept development and there is no new shooting. So for video or for print projects, these would be limited to using existing assets and recuts. We also have a couple other ones that we use, like account codes, and we align project managers, project coordinators to accounts. And we also have audience criteria, which help to align the priority of our resources to producing externally viewed content.
I think it's really interesting how you've deployed your tier structure and you actually use to define the level of effort. Correct me if I'm wrong here, and I just want to level set for people watching. So for each type of template that you actually have like 2 or 3 versions of it with the same name, but with a different tier to account for prioritization, effort, and so on. So you're really setting up the information on the template level so that then you can track later on.
We do, yep. So we have all the level of effort built in directly into our project templates, which are aligned to marketing vehicles. So a billboard template. We would also have a billboard template that's a tier 1 template, tier 2 template, tier 3 template, with all the associated work and the corresponding level of effort. So when we pull those projects in from the templates, they are basically ready to go with all of our average usage, and then we dial them in from there.
very creative usage too.
So I thought it would be helpful to talk about priorities. I think they come together in a few different ways. And this is sort of a realization that we've come to a little bit more recently. So I threw a couple pie charts up here that are all similarly prioritized projects. So they all represent projects that are just as important as each other. But when you look at it, their makeup is really, really different. And I think this is why sometimes it's hard to say, you know, we need to work on this one right now, and maybe a different project needs to wait for a moment. So we look at a few different things. We look at audience makeup, and we ask ourselves questions like, is this project going to be viewed by customers or employees? And is this a broad demo or a very targeted one? We also look at accounts and messaging priority. So is this account or message something that we should prioritize due to organizational impact or tie back to high-level organizational goals? And then launch date. And I probably don't need to explain that one, but these are the projects that are score high on the get it done tomorrow, no matter what execution type, or on the flip side, take whatever time you need and get it right.
So I love exploring the idea that there's not only one reason to prioritize things, and there's also not only one way to do it either. And you have customized the system to really fit what your organization needs. So really good work there as well.
Yeah, it just sort of gives us a framework to have discussions around priorities. So reporting. At this point, you know, we've got a good base of information collected, and now it's time to pull it all together. So if you're a little more adventurous and you prefer to take on analytics your own, the reporting tool does pull all the data that you need. Litho makes it really easy to create any type of report, for instance, projects, work, time, requests, and you can filter down the data to exactly what you're looking for. So what I usually do is apply some sorts, and I at least do a spot audit, and I try to correct any of the inconsistencies I see. This way I can catch any glaring errors really early through this reporting process. It also gives me an opportunity to align the team on expectations. So if I'm seeing custom fields that are typically being input with the wrong returns, we can use it as a retraining opportunity at that point. And then you can export into whatever tool you're most comfortable with. You can start to analyze and pull together the data summaries that you need in order to tell your story.
Reporting is really one of the most powerful features in Litho, right? There's so much you can do with the data that is already in the system. There's so many actionable insights you can get. And then you can segment it to the KPIs that are important to you and your organization. The more that you put into the system, the more you're going to be able to report on. So that's something to keep in mind as well. We'll also drop a link to our help page on some reportings that we find useful. But more than that, I would actually like to challenge everyone watching this webinar today who is not taking advantage of the reporting feature in Litho to really contact their CSMs, ask for some suggestions, best practices, any recommendations that they can give you. If you haven't had your strategic business review, which has a lot of good reporting information as well, reach out to your CSM, ask for a strategic business review. Those insights are really, really important for you to kind of move forward on your process.
So for us, we look at different metrics and different cadences. Like Nick said, you start getting a lot of data built in there, and it's hard to sort of sift through it and figure out what's important. It's not all important all the time. So this is sort of the cadence and the different metrics that we look at. So on the daily level, we look at all work and the level of effort assigned to each team member. And we need that to manage day-to-day business. Then weekly, we sort of come up a level and we're looking at the number of new requests and the number of new projects. And this helps us look for trends up and down, which will soon impact our workload. And then at a monthly level, we're looking at things like audience split, the average queue time, the average request durations. We use this information to help inform requesters on when to come to us. Are lead times a little longer? Are they a little shorter? But this is when we start to report out to the organization on that. Quarterly, we do time utilization. So this starts to help us understand if our work is generally taking longer than what we're scheduling it for. We also run our batched workflow updates at the same quarterly cadence. They sort of go hand in hand because we're updating the level of effort in the project templates if we find that our average LOEs are sort of being overutilized in comparison to track time. And then yearly, so this is the big business reviews. This is when we're really reporting back to the organization. We're looking at things like type of requests, types of deliverables, a mix of what sort of specialties we need to deliver on these types of deliverables, the mix of our clients, the average number of proof versions, and content value. So these are the things that we need in order to dial in our resources to deliver on the demand typically for the following year.
I really love how this slide's organized. It brings back the idea of impact or leading metrics versus lagging metrics on and how like tracking and managing your daily and weekly metrics will have and actually having action items based on it will impact your monthly, quarterly, yearly metrics, all based on the goals that you have. Like the idea of your daily level of effort, who's working on what, will impact how long the projects will take and how many projects you can do in a year and so on. Question for you, Lauren, is, and really for anybody watching to think about it as well, what are the KPIs that your team is measured by?
Yeah, so I think like as we've had data more accessible, we've sort of developed our KPIs over time. So I could probably talk about KPIs itself just for an hour, but I can mention a few. So the big ones are probably metrics around timing, volume, utilization, and customer satisfaction. So I know you brought up lots of times time to first proof, which we don't use. I think that's a great one. But we use a little bit broader ones in terms of request queue time, which would be request submittal to project creation. And we also use request duration, which would be request submittal to request complete. For volume, we don't just look at general project counts or request counts, because really a number is just a number, but we also break this down to understand our throughput in terms of project types and complexity. For utilization, we're really making sure that we're trying to use our resources as much as we possibly can. So we're looking at that. And then customer satisfaction, which is obviously a softer one, but we're making sure that we're taking time and proactively asking for feedback from our requesters and from our stakeholders to understand if we're meeting their needs, both in terms of customer service, as well as through creative execution.
Awesome. And for everybody, Lauren does send me her yearly reports, the same report that she sends to her leadership. She sends it to me so I can take a look. They're very well thought out. They include a lot of good information. I feel like creative teams do a lot of work and a lot of good work that needs to be shown off, and you do a really good job on showing that off. I particularly love the content value part because you assign a dollar amount to the work that you have done, and then you can go back and show leadership the cost avoidance of having that in-house agents, and that is so valuable and so powerful.
Yeah, I feel like that really takes, the creative teams out of the role of order taker and really illustrating the value. So I did share, like, obviously we're running lots of metrics and this is just one of them, but sort of our simple calculation for this. So we just take the number of deliverables and multiply that by the level of effort that we expect to spend on those deliverables, and then multiply that out again by an industry average, a competitive industry average rate. So you could really dial this in. I mean, you would typically say that, if we're going to pull in external resources, it's likely it's going to take them longer to execute on the work that you would do in-house. So you might require a certain percentage of inflation of hours. You could also look at this and drill it down to, some creative services are going to cost more and it's not going to be that blended average rate. And you could sort of figure it out that way. But for this one, we just try to keep it simple. So let's take a look at forecasting. We've assessed our current state. We have a good handle on how much we do. And now what we need to do is apply some logic to start to forecast demand. So we at Sheetz do this in terms of trends with some added insight from our business and our messaging strategy. So we take a look at our marketing vehicles and project project volume and tier, which tells us complexity in terms of hours. And all of our learnings are translated information that we can then update and house in project templates in terms of custom fields and in work level of effort. So then we take an opportunity to discuss any known shifts with our business partners at Sheetz. Any folks that own strategy or messaging and placement. And then we figure out how their strategy changes are going to impact the future demand on the creative team.
Right. The theme that we keep on seeing here is that keeps on coming back is that setting up the system ahead of time and putting the work into project templates, setting up custom fields, level of effort will really be beneficial in the long run, and you'll be able to gain a lot of efficiencies.
Yeah, I mean, it does take time. Honestly, we've been through, I think, 3 major workflow template iterations. So we didn't get it right the first time, but we just keep working on it. So the second part of forecasting, we can now update with what we know based on these changes and these insights. So now we can say how many labor hours are required to deliver on the projected demand. We take an extra step and we find it helpful to develop some utilization models, and we sort of play around with the resource allocation and sort of understand, where we're going to meet limits, where we may be over, where we may be under based on the types of specialty constraints we may have. And as a last step, before we share the forecast out, either with our team or with the organization, I always take a moment and sort of remove myself. We're pretty deep at this point, deep in the data, deep in the analysis, deep in the calculations, deep in the logic. And I just sort of ask myself, is there anything that feels wrong? So this could be scenarios like, is there any volume that looks like it grew too significantly or not enough? Or are there any projected hours that look too high or too low? So I think it's also probably worth mentioning that, at first you might not have a lot of data to define trends, and that's totally okay. You just got to work with what you have. So if you have a week's worth of data, you know what your volume was, or you know what your mix was for the last week, just apply those learnings to the next week. But before you know it, you'll be week over week, month over month. Once you get to, month over month, you might be able to start to find a little bit of seasonality or a year in, and other insights that might affect the flow of requests. And after multiple years, you can really start to validate these trends and figure out what's sticky and maybe what was influenced or reactionary to the environment. And you can start to really dial in those projections accordingly.
Yes, I think seasonality is something that a lot of people watching will be able to relate to, especially if you're in the retail or consumer goods verticals, because the cyclical nature of those business. So there's always more opportunity to do forecasting there too.
I think even if you're not, though, you can still identify the opportunities where you can't forecast. You might have months where you're like, I know that April is going to be a storm, and I'm just going to plan around April being that ad hoc month. And we're just going to leave a bunch of air in the schedule to make sure that we can accommodate it because we know it's probably coming.
Yeah, most marketing teams have an idea of their calendar or what usually happens in different parts of the year.
So let's talk about capacity. We're going to start applying everything that we've learned to managing the day-to-day workload of the team. And you could just use your payroll hours, but we have a little bit of a different perspective. So to understand resource capacity, we set weekly utilization targets. So we know how many hours that we have. I don't know how many people caught the Lithopia sessions, but there was a joke going around about, no bathroom breaks. And I bring it up again, not just because it's funny, but it's really easy to overlook all those little small things that come up throughout the day. So how much of your team member's day could you or should you schedule? And it's going to be different for everybody. And it probably even is going to be different by, the specific position, the job responsibilities, more or less meeting time, more or less email time, outlining responsibilities. But at Sheetz, we set a target for most resources of about 6 hours per day of schedulable time for work. And then we set these daily targets in the team members' availability in Litho. Also, if there's any big buckets of what we would consider non-billable time, team workshops, travel, things like that, these also get entered as time off, and it removes it directly from workload availability. And then next, we schedule our priority work in. So as these requests are working to be defined, we set what we call blockers. We do this by creating planned work items as tentative holds in workload so that we know that we have the time reserved to do the important work when we know that it's coming. So we know that requests sometimes take a little while to filter down to us. This is our way of sort of reserving that time that we know we're going to need later. We do eventually remove the blockers once the requests are accepted and the real actualized work is scheduled in. So then what's left in workload availability? We sort of consider that whatever time is left, that's what we have available for the ad hoc requests. So let's take a look at how this plays out in workflow. So on the left there, you can see that we have planned work tagged with planned priority statuses with the projected level of effort and the team members assigned. You could use custom work statuses, but we use priorities. As you can see on the right-hand side, the priority flags, the green ones, will show right there in the detailed work view.
Strategic planning, it's a very hot topic. And we do get asked pretty often about best practices when it comes to doing within the platform. So I really like what he did with the plan priority in green, so that if someone is looking at their workload, let's say they're looking a couple of weeks in advance, they can see if it's something is green, that means it's planned, meaning it's a placeholder, it's not there yet. So they have a better idea of what's coming up. And just so people understand, once the actual request comes in for that planned work, what happens with the planned tasks or the planned projects?
Yeah, so we try to get our planned projects in about at least a quarter in advance, so that as we're scheduling ad hoc work throughout that quarter, that time is already reserved. But as those priority projects come in and we kick off those projects, then we'll schedule in the work. As soon as the work hits workload, then we go ahead and we delete all the planned work items. So then it doesn't mess up any of our reporting. But these planned projects and planned work, they have templates, just like all of our vehicle project templates do. And we're actually just about to date calc them, just to make it a little bit easier on ourselves.
So you saw, that's what I was going to ask, if they're templatized. So that's a great trick to just get ahead as well.
Yeah. So I know this sounds like a lot, but it's really worth it because it actually works. Obviously, I'm here talking to you about it. So let's see what it looks like from the start of a new request through to managing the in-progress workload. So to appropriately manage resources, we got to start with knowing what requests and what work there is to do. So we start with reviewing and accepting those requests. And again, we either direct them, direct the requesters directly out to a DM brand center if assets are already existing, or we go ahead and we assign requests and projects. And then we assign the corresponding work based on level of effort and priorities. So on the next slide here, on the left, you can see how we use custom fields tagged onto the end of our request forms to help with what we call pre-assignments. This is sort of our ideal resource setup since there's no way to really validate detailed scheduling conflicts at this point. And this also sort of helps for the timing and communication gaps that sometimes exist between when the request gets reviewed and when the project actually gets kicked off. And then on the right, you can see how these assignees get applied to that project work. So upon assignment, we make sure that any work or level of effort adjustments needed happen, and we add any of our priority tags. So we might be at this point adding or removing or editing template tasks to what's required by that specific project scope, since we know every project is, sort of its own and a little bit different. As another sort of helpful tip, as we're developing these work back schedules and we're assigning out all of this work, we do pull up workload sort of on another tab, and we check for conflicts as we go. And as much as possible, we try to schedule these new tasks around existing workflow commitments. It really helps us save time whenever we meet to review workload management, that we've already avoided those conflicts versus sort of piling them all up and having to go back and fix them later.
Yeah, I really think that section on the bottom of your request form, it's another very creative usage of a feature that I don't see a lot of people doing. You're basically telling the stakeholder, you're not expected to know everything about the work that we do or how we do it. You can go ahead, submit the request. Then the traffic team or your project manager will come and fill out the section using their knowledge of the creative process, and maybe even having some discussion on the comment section of a request that they had with a stakeholder. And then all items in that section are also custom fields, which then will be mapped to the project, tracked, and then used to make decisions as far as priorities and assignments and so on. So a very clever way to set up your request form and even take some burden out of the stakeholder, which will also enhance their experience even further.
Yeah, for sure. So we've got all of our work loaded in, and we're moving sort of onto day-to-day management. We need to review all of our workload commitments and traffic them according to the project needs. This also includes general change management for projects. So if you want instant value, this is your piece. So we can see exactly what resources are under or over capacity. And when we're reviewing workload, we do a few types of common adjustments that we call leveling, smoothing, and trafficking. So smoothing applies typically to one resource. So in those blue boxes there, you can see an example of this. We want to make sure that work is applied to one resource as evenly as possible across their dates. So you can see that resource that's highlighted in blue. They're sort of under on Monday, over on Tuesday, under on Wednesday, over on Thursday. And we would try to fix this by spanning out the work start dates back from the due dates to extend that duration across both days. And that will ensure that more work doesn't end up filling that gap on Monday and Wednesday in this scenario. And the next is leveling. So this applies to multiple resources. There's an example there highlighted in green. We want to make sure that our work is applied to all of our resources as evenly as possible, making sure that not one resource is way overscheduled and another resource is way underutilized. So as long as those two resources that are highlighted have the same skill sets, then we could actually start to either reassign individual work items, or we could reassign a whole project to sort of reconcile that overage. If we're going to reassign a whole project, we actually go back to the project, and then we use the specialties feature to reassign all of that assigning scope of work for that project all at once. Makes it really easy.
I may have to talk to my product team here that I think we might have to change the name workload view to instant gratification view. Because if you're really taking the time to define your LOEs, you're using start and due dates, you're absolutely right. That is exactly what you get out of this view. And we love to be able to, deliver that value every day, every time you come to it.
Yeah, I mean, everything is here. It's at the tips of your fingers, everything that you need to make the decisions on day-to-day workload management.
Right.
So the last section here is trafficking. We review any of the new work that needs added in. This is typically revisions. We'll also do level of effort adjustments. So sometimes we have to increase level of effort either due to delays in completion or due to project scope changes. And we'll do that all with trafficking. We also take a moment to retag priority statuses. On the right-hand side, you'll see a little purple tag there. So I'm showing an example of what we call a late tag. And this might be a sort of unique usage for us. But the late tags really help us from creating multiple delays. So we know when we see these purple flags that this piece of work has already been delayed once. It might have not been delivered on time. Maybe we had to deprioritize it for other priority work and we sort of shifted it out in the schedule. But when designers see these purple tags, they know it should be the first thing, as long as there's not other priority tags, this should be one of the first things that they work on for the day to make sure that it's not late again. And when we see it on workload view, we know that we are going to try not to shift that out another time if it has been delayed already.
So what are some of the other colors and other priority names that you're using in the system? You've mentioned, the purple here with late, the green that was a planned. I think we saw earlier the red being rush. What are some of the other ones that you use, and what do they mean?
Yeah, so we have the green planned, we have the purple late or reschedule, we have rush, and we have high. So rush and high might be a little bit ambiguous, but we do use them pretty purposely. So rush to us is stop what you're doing and do this now. That means if a rush task gets scheduled at 1 o'clock, someone is probably slacking you or calling you to say, hey, I know that you're shooting right now, but we need you to stop and go do this thing. So it's seldom. I mean, we will definitely not abuse it, but it's going to take other things to sort of shift everybody's workload in order to accommodate a rush task. And then high is really our typical like high importance. This usually means if it's on the designer's schedule to do it first that day, if they don't have any rush. So our priority goes for a designer in terms of work on rush first, and then high, and then late, and then anything that doesn't have a priority status.
All right. So again, many different ways to define the priorities and what do they mean, and making sure that everybody knows what they mean.
I think that's the key. As long as everybody knows what they mean and everybody's aligned to what they mean, then they work pretty well.
Right.
So reflection, I think this can be an easy one to forget. I mean, we've spent so much time on our SOPs and our process and aligning our team and our stakeholders to our tool. But how can we make sure that, we're really capitalizing on our learnings? We take a moment to reflect. So I thought I'd share some proof points and what we've learned through reflecting on our process. So the first one pertains to one of our newer implemented features, which is DAM brand centers. One of the opportunities we found, which I started to talk about earlier with sponsorships, was we were getting requests for really similar assets. And we were sometimes maybe producing them over and over again. So we loaded up all of these assets to a brand center. And by making these most requested assets more accessible, we saw an immediate reduction. For this request type alone, we saw a reduction of 98% of those requests immediately. And by immediate, I mean within 30 days. So obviously it took some time to set up. It took a few weeks to set up, but it paid off within a month. So another point, like all these assets are cyclical here. So as we do get the few requests now that we get, we produce those assets, we link them out to the brand center, and then we immediately reduce the feature volume for those requests as well.
Right. When you told me that number, I was really taken back. I knew it was a really good idea and something that we've been pushing our customers to do more and more, but I think that exceeded any expectations that I had. 98%, it's extremely high.
Yeah, I thought I think it was a great fit for this type of program, but.
Right.
Yeah, so the next thing that we found was working files and the integration between DAM and workflow. So as we scheduled up our designer with these 6-hour days, we found that they were still spending a lot of non-build time just trying to find the assets that they need to start the work they were scheduled. So we tried to work to ease this designer's workload by ensuring that the files were most accessible. So we implemented 2 different tasks in our workflow project templates. One is called working files, and the other one is called deployment files. So at the end of each project, the designers load up their packaged working files to DAM, they tag them as working files, and then they link it back to the workflow task. And they do the exact same thing with their deployment files as well.
Right. The idea of having working files within the DAM is something that has picked up a lot of steam as well lately. So tell me a little bit about the working files that you're putting in the DAM. At what stage of the process are they being uploaded to the DAM? And kind of what type of files they are? How are you organizing them? Can everyone see those working files?
Yeah, so everybody can see them. We've been putting them in from day one. We've been putting our deployment files and our working files both into DAM. So the file types can vary depending on what the asset is and how the files are built. But typically you might see a zipped package of layouts with linked assets, or it might just be one file that's layered with live type in it. So the creators do wait. They wait until the end of the project. We don't shift a lot of work around in progress, which might change that for us, but we don't usually have to share those working files until that project is complete. So they wait until the end and they package them up and they put them out to DAM together. We really honestly thought that the tags would be enough to sort of keep those files separated in DAM, but honestly, tag taxonomy compliance can be a struggle sometimes. So we found that adding those workflow tasks was just another safeguard for us, and it made it really accessible. Designers can go back to the projects, that we did prior if they need to reference them. And the link is right there in the working files task. It makes it really easy for them.
Awesome. Yeah.
So I think this last one really made the biggest difference in how the day-to-day feels like for our team. And this is really around meeting cadence and focus. So we've worked really hard to create better transparency around workload. So for us, we really found that there's no need anymore for those typical daily meetings to discuss, what's done, what's coming up. We see it. We see it all the time. We talk about it all the time. So we really repurposed that daily meeting time into opportunities that were more valuable to have more focused conversations. So we use some of this time now to do what we call a weekly work share meeting. We use this to celebrate success and have designers share their completed work with the whole team. So not only do they get sort of a moment to brag about all the amazing work that they're pouring themselves into, but everybody else also gets the idea of what everybody else is working on. And we get to collectively see this value that we're all creating together.
That's such an empowering meeting for your creative team to have. I love the type of meetings that they're empowering the creative team, and definitely can't and shouldn't be an email, right? And it's good that you're clarifying that the goal should never be to eliminate all of the meetings that you have. There's still need for communication and for teams to come together and meet with each other and connect. People tend to build better together. So the goal here is to eliminate some of the unnecessary meetings. And you have done that with the process, right? It has allowed you to not only eliminate some of the meetings that were now unnecessary, but take that time and then have more focused meetings that have a set goal and will help your creative team achieve a better content outcome. So very good work with a weekly share. And then there's a few other meetings there as well.
Yeah, so we've really dialed in what our agenda items are and dialed in our audience here on the rest of these meetings as well. So it's a little bit smaller audience. So twice a week, we meet and review just the requests that are in queue. We work to qualify them, review the details, figure out if what we need is there, if it's not, and then we prioritize them for the project kickoff meetings. So for project kickoff meetings, we do these for all tier 2 projects and sometimes others that we feel are a little bit more ambiguous that we need to talk about. But with these ones, the project coordinators pull the project team together, they download, those requests, they unblock and they forecast risk for each of these projects as they kick them off. And then the last type of really focused meeting we do is on the opposite 2 days that we do request reviews. So we do workload management, which is that smoothing and trafficking exercise I described earlier, just looking at all the work that's on everybody's schedule.
Well, that is awesome. First of all, Lauren, I want to thank you for being a great partner and putting together this presentation, sharing your creative process in your voice. I say for everyone, I say that for everyone that I think I can speak for everyone when I say that you've created an amazing process. And I don't think there's any doubt on why I call you a creative operations powerhouse. One thing that I do want to make sure that people also understand is that this wasn't done overnight, right? Sheetz has been developing the process for, I'd say, about 3 years now, and has gotten to a place where the process is very dynamic, it's successful, but it took some time and work, and not everything worked at the first time, as you mentioned before, but really you have to start somewhere. Regardless of how many users or how dynamic your process currently is, we can help you build it. We can help you get more dynamic. There's definitely tons of resources to help people get to that level. And also, we never stop working on the creative process. There's also something that you can tweak, something that you can make better, efficiencies that you can gain. And as you know, we're also always coming out with new features and that are always requested by our customers, and always trying to help you solve those problems as well. What would be the one tip that you would give to people trying to, revamp their process or start something new?
Yeah, keep working at it. I mean, sometimes it's in baby steps. Just wouldn't be discouraged that, sometimes you're maybe not making as much progress as quickly as you would like, but keep engaging your team. Make sure that everybody is aligned and committed to making it work. And as long as everybody is, you'll get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. We have some questions coming in. There are some that are open. Let's start here. Nick says something that I like, but I can't remember. Well, you get to watch this recording again. We'll send you the link afterwards. So Anonymous said, so the team needs to track their time. I'll let you give your answer, and then I'll provide some perspective as well.
Yeah, so the team tracks their time. Everybody does it. We sort of set parameters on how specific they get with tracking their time. So we typically do it to the 15-minute interval. We try to dictate what time we consider to be billable with different time categories. So you can go through and set time categories. We have some set up for different phases of work. So we know how much time people are spending on creative concepting versus maybe creative production or time spent in meetings. And I mean, you can go as crazy deep as you feel like you need to. Sometimes we tend to go deep, and then we sort of dial it back once we realize that we don't need to track it at that detail, or we have more data than maybe would it make sense to keep tracking. But everybody does it, whether it's a project coordinator, whether it's a designer, whether it's a videographer. It's really the only way that we, since we're managing workload with level of effort, we have to understand if we're actualizing all of that level of effort that we're scheduling, and that's how we do it.
I love that answer. I also want to provide the other perspective as well. We do have teams that are not tracking time. They're using LOE as kind of the baseline and going from there and using that as their how much time they've spent. So if it fits what you're looking for, you can track time and you can ask everybody to track their own time. But for a lot of people, it doesn't, and so you don't have to. I have several teams that use LOE successfully, that maybe track time in the beginning, use that to establish their baseline, and now they're successful with LOEs. And there are teams that they kind of just had a good idea of how much time they spend on different types of assets and different tasks and proofs, so they use that. All right.
Great.
So let's go to the next one. How large is your team that is using Litho on a daily or managing their work? And how many different skill sets is it covering? For example, is this all designers, copywriters, managers?
Yeah, it's everyone. So with our team, we have about 30, just over 30 active daily Litho users. We provide vendors with seats to Litho as well. So whether they're agency or production vendors, we also have them in there. So that's why it's a little over the 25 team members that Nick introduced me with. But our internal team, everybody is in there. So whether it's a copywriter, whether it's a graphic designer, a digital designer, a videographer, a producer, everybody's in there.
Awesome. Then next, for a company with our project management team of managers and coordinators, what piece of all of this is the most important for a team to implement? It's not realistic for us to do all of this while also being designers, marketeers. I'm going to go ahead and say I agree. Doing all of this for a team that doesn't have a project manager, maybe it's not feasible. There are a lot of parts of it. You got to start somewhere, or the two things. But Lauren, what tips do you have for
project templates? So I would say if your team is a little bit more lean, especially if you don't have project coordinators or project managers that's going to help facilitate some of this along with trafficking, then I would definitely recommend at least getting your standards put into your project templates. And it'll help all of this to happen a little bit more automatically, maybe with a little bit less validation and time to sort of reflect and go through and figure out what's working, what's not. But at bare minimum, as long as your project templates are set up with the work that typically happens and the level of effort with how long it typically takes, it will automatically start dumping all of that into the workload management view as soon as you kick off your projects and apply dates to those if you haven't date capped.
Awesome. I am going to combine Joe's and Chris's question here. First, how many stakeholders do you have? Do you work with through Litho? And also, I'd like to explain who your stakeholders can be. I think that might be useful as well. And then, how do you deal with scope creep or projects that need much longer than anticipated time?
So stakeholders, we have about just over 200 stakeholders. And obviously there's some fallout there. That's some that choose to engage really, really deeply in Litho and others that maybe not so much. I would say, I haven't looked at this recently, honestly, in terms of like how many are directly engaging, because we have different levels of engagement. You know, we have some that are actively engaged in proof reviews, or we might have some that are really just engaged at their request level. I would say probably about 80% of the 200 stakeholders are engaged at some level within Litho. Our stakeholders are organizational partners that own messaging. So for us, that would be people that work in other departments like HR or marketing that have a message to communicate that requires creative content.
All right.
Was the second part of your question, Nick?
How do you deal with scope creep in projects that need much longer than anticipated?
Scope creep. So we've been all over the board. We've gone through and actually had requests be submitted for scope changes, which was obviously a little bit too far. We dialed back on that. But we have project coordinators that are super, super capable. They are great at managing and capturing and communicating those changes to the project team. So as the scope changes happen, we sort of make notes in our project to keep track of them. And then we create work throughout that project. And what we find is that it's usually non-standard work. So I said earlier, we use like standard work names. So we can tell pretty quickly when a project is starting to go off the rails. And since we schedule in all of our creative development tasks, like revisions separately, we can start to track, oh, this revision was due to scope creep, things changing within scope, and it created another hour of work. And now we are 6 revisions in due to scope changes. And that was an extra, 12 hours.
Awesome. Also, I know that you guys take a look at like the review versions, you take a look at proofs that went very high, and then you go in and address it and make sure that, if it's a one-off, it's a one-off. But if it's like some systemic issues there, then you got to change the process in some way.
Yeah, we look at the proof versions and we can distill it down to say, is it a certain design resource that has a higher proof version count, or is it due to an account? Is it a certain requester that pushes more sort of what we call moving furniture revisions, or is it attributed to something else? But we have enough data that we sort of just distill it down to try to make some sense out of it.
Awesome. Chanel Whitehead asks, what is a good place to start for small teams? I would say here, I think like Lauren mentioned, project templates is a great place to start setting them up as robust as you can. Understand that it's not going to be perfect on your first try. If you do achieve perfection the first time, please teach me how. But you will get better as you use it. You'll learn. It's a process. You'll learn. So I would say start with project templates and define those KPIs that are important for you and your company, because then you can make those into custom fields. But I'll definitely say talk to your customer success manager. He or she will definitely have a lot of good insight on that. Howard Schwartz says, love to see some reporting examples. Again, I'll talk to your CSM. We do have some good reporting examples. There's quite a bit on that we do with strategic business reviews. There is also quite a bit on the help page that I dropped the link for. Q asked, how do you have job requesters fill out / add marketing briefs to job requests?
So we try to dial in our request forms so that they are most applicable to the type of person that is requesting them. So we find across the organization, as we engage with these stakeholders more, and they are more engaged in Litho and they're coming to us more often, that then we really take the time to look at the request forms and say, are they meeting all the needs for that stakeholder? And we'll dial in all the questions that we ask. Maybe we put like a attachment thing at the bottom where they can attach additional files. But a lot of the questions that we ask within those forms really help to develop the brief. Who is the audience? What are the proof points? Why are we communicating? And that really feeds into the briefs that then our teams are delivering back to the customers for review and making sure that we're dialed in.
Awesome. How large is your team? Rough number is fine. I think you've already answered that. Around 30, 25 really within the creative, and then managers. So Howard Schwartz asks, do you adjust LOE based on actuals? If so, it'd be great to see your process on that.
So we do dial them in. So at the beginning of setting level of effort, when we were setting up our project templates and we said, we're gonna take a first stab at this, it was me and my co-manager looking at the work and saying, we think this is gonna take an hour. We think this is gonna take 2 hours. And we just build it in. And we would kick off projects and we would have people work and track their time. And then we use the time tracked as validation. And then we pull quarterly the tracked time and compare it to the level of effort that was assigned. And Litho does that with a % utilization score already directly in reporting. You can pull it and look at it without any more calculation. And we say on average, so we don't want to set this up to one specific resource or specialty type. We want to say across all of our graphic designers, across all of our digital designers, on average, how long is it taking them to execute creative development on, let's say, a tier 3 billboard? And then whatever that average is, that's what we use to dial in our level of effort. So if we find that messaging complexity is driving creative development time for a certain scope of work, we'll find that their tracked time starts to increase, and then we go up quarterly and we adjust in those level of efforts accordingly. And we can go up and down based on what the needs of the business are.
Awesome, thank you. Howard Schwartz, does Litho connect clients to compare notes and lessons learned to have a look under the hood of each company forms, project workflows, and reporting? Howard, I'm glad you asked that. We do. First, the first answer is do. I know, Lauren, I think we've already got you to meet with a few customers. You've been in a few roundtables, correct?
Yep.
Howard, we do roundtables fairly often with our customers, but the biggest one is the Lithopia, which is our in-person conference. It is the Creative Operations Conference. Will be hosted in the Raleigh-Durham area in August 29th and 30th, and we'll have all of our customers sharing what works well on their process. What have they done? Some tips, tricks. I think Lauren or somebody at Sheetz might be coming. Maybe we're working on that. If we usually send communication about when those roundtables or anything like that is happening, we try to have these webinars fairly often with customers sharing their tips. We are passionate about building this community of creatives because I think it's very important for empowering and everything else. I hope this helped. We're almost at time. So Christopher says, how many people are in your PMO? So I'm guessing here is that how many traffic managers and project managers you have, which is the same question that Melody asked.
So I have 4. Out of our 25 people, I have 4 project coordinators. None of them have a specific traffic management role. So they sort of collectively do it together with one that sort of leads in terms of traffic managing, sort of presents the opportunities, but then they all work through the solutions together. But I have 4.
And I really want to say that we got to every single question. I know we're at 12, but we have one last one. Do you have a targeted or allowed number of revisions for a given LOE?
So our level of effort for creative development is just for the initial proof. And then we add the revisions as needed and dial in the level of effort per revision round based on the feedback. So we'll moderate the feedback, we'll align with the design resource, figure out how long we think it's going to take, And then we actually put in either an hour or half an hour or 2 hours or 4 hours, depending on what those revisions are.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah. I love that part. Like, you have 30 comments on a review. Yeah, we're gonna need a little bit more times. I have 2 comments. Probably don't need that long. So yeah, so just dial it in, make sure that things fit what you need. Thank you, Lauren, again so much for taking the time to go through this webinar with us. Guys, if you guys have any other questions, please let us know. We'll make ourselves available. Make sure to reach out to your CSM if you're a customer. If you're not and you want to ask some questions, reach out to our team through our webpage. And yeah, I saw somebody asked about a link to Lithopia. The registration is not quite open yet. We'll be open. We'll be open soon, and we'll make sure everybody gets a nice email inviting them to it. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining. See ya.